Hi there, Titans, and welcome back to another Titan Academy video. Today we'll be talking about date time, and date range fields in Titan Web. First, we'll talk about what happens when we push date fields to Salesforce. Next, we'll talk about how to format your date field. After that, we'll show you how you can default the date to the current date or the current time. Then we'll show you how you can change the locale for your date time picker or your date time modal. And finally, we'll show you how you can disable future and past selections on your date time fields. Let's get started. So, of course, we need to add our fields to the project, and we can do that by heading to our Pink Plus inputs and finding our date fields, which are all right over here. You could, of course, always search for these. And we have the following fields: a date field, a time field, a date range field, and a date time field. And each of these fields has a picker or a modal that comes up that's unique to the field type that helps us select our date and time in an easy way. Now, what I want to show you is what happens when we push our date time field to Salesforce. And we have a lot of questions about how time zones work and what happens when you push dates, what time zone will they be pushed from. And so let's take a look at how this will work. So I've already set up here on this button a Salesforce push to just create a contact, and I'm only doing this just to demonstrate what the date time field will look like in Salesforce. So I've mapped this to last name here, and I've also mapped this to a date time field in my Salesforce called start. And we'll see what values actually get pushed to these fields. Now, just to spoil you ahead of time, what we do in Titan is we push the UTM, or just the basic time zone without any additional hours, to Salesforce, and Salesforce then converts it. And that's what happens when we push to a time field or a date time field. If we push to a text field like last name, we will actually get the date time in the time zone of the user who pushed to Salesforce. So let's turn on our debug mode, or make sure that debug is turned on so we can take a look at this. But what we're going to do here is we'll just refresh our page here, and first we'll select, let's say, today's date, and we'll just do the current time. And if I look at debug, I can see that it really is holding my current time, and that's the same time I see here on my computer. And this is being passed from my browser. It's essentially taking my time zone from the browser, and it understands my date time as the end user. No configuration on the Titan side needed. It's just taking it directly from the user's browser. Now, when I push this to Salesforce, I'm going to head over here to the record that I just pushed. And just to show you ahead of time, the time zone that I'm operating in here is Asia, Tokyo, just for the purposes of this video, just to show you. So I should be +9 here. And you can see that the date that we push to the last name here, to the text field, is actually the time zone that we're currently in, which is +3. And we're getting the current time as we saw in my browser right over here. And this is Salesforce's preferred format for date time here. And if I head over to the start date, though, I see that it's actually 4:09, not 10:09. And that's because my time zone in Salesforce that I've set as a user in Salesforce is +9. And so I'm getting 6 hours ahead of time zone of the end user who pushed this date time. So again, we're pushing basic UTM to this date field, and Salesforce is converting it for the end user in Salesforce. And so based on the Salesforce time zone, it's converting. And if I were to change my time zone here, of course, the date time here would change to be relevant for my time zone as a Salesforce user. All right, that's in regards to pushing date time to Salesforce. What about formatting? So all of these fields, we can decide what it looks like in terms of the format, and we can change what our end user sees. So for example, here we can do month, day, and year, or day, month, year. Same thing, of course, goes for our date time field. We can change format, and we can change time format to be 12 or 24 hours. Same thing here. We can change our time format to be 12 or 24 hours. Date range, we have the ability to change the format, and we can set certain limits, such as the amount of months that we display when we give you the range, the start date and end date as default dates. And once we're already talking about default dates, we can talk about setting up using the current date time or current date or time for our field. So if I say use current date and I preview this, it's going to show me the current date. if I do use current time, it's going to show me the current time. And again, this time is coming from the browser. Now, the next thing we can do is we can set a locale for our date, time, or in general, our pickers. So let's just do this with the date field, but this will work on all of these fields. And head over to interactivity, and I'm going to change the locale. And I'll change the locale here to, let's say, German. And now if I take a look here, I can see that my month and language here is in German. And we can also do auto detect locale, and then it would take the locale from our browser and automatically update the locale here so that we could have any language we want in our picker, essentially. All right, the final thing we can do here is sometimes you might not want your end user to be able to choose whatever date they want. For example, if I choose right now, I can go back as far as I want, I can go forward, and I can choose any date. But I might want to restrict them to certain dates, and for that I can disable future or past here. So for example, if I disable future, I'll refresh my page. Now I'm not able to move forward to future months in the picker. It's the end of the month, so it's hard to demonstrate here, but if I was in the 19th of the month, I wouldn't be able to choose any of these dates as well, and the same thing works for disable past. Now, my end user can still enter in a value that's in the future by doing something like this. So if you really don't want them to use future dates, you also need to add a value role. This is just for the picker itself, and that's how it's done.